order. This is the purpose of this committee is to discuss the Ives Trail Greenway and easements, and in particular, a certain easement known as lots 1, 2, I think it's 124011. Yeah, is that right?
That is, I believe that's correct. Yep, right here. It's I-24011, and the city parcel is I-23012.
And city parcel I-23012. Okay. Tonight, I am the chairman of the committee, Joe Cabo, and with me I have Councilman Knapp to my left. We have Mr. Perkins, unfortunately had conflict with his work schedule and couldn't be here this evening. We have Corporation Counsel Ray Yaman. We have the city's environmental consultant, Mr. Jack Kuchahowski. We have the Ives Trail Greenway chairperson, Mr. Michael Cunningham, with us tonight. We have ex officio member Councilman Curran. We have ex officio member Councilwoman Deep D'Amici. We have David St. Hilaire, our finance director, and we have Dennis Alpern, our planning director for the city, and members of the public. Thank everyone for being here tonight. I'm happy that it hasn't rained as much as they said it was going to rain today. And I think so far, but it's delayed, and anytime there's a delay, you hope that you don't miss that amount of rain. I'd like to open up the meeting by probably going to Mr. Yaman and asking Mr. Yaman just to give us a brief description. A lot of us have heard a lot of this about this already. We've been through a public hearing on it. We've been through a council meeting on it. So some of us know a lot about it, but for the record, just give us a brief description of where we are, where we're trying to go, and then I'm going to probably move to Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Kuchahowski, Mr. Alpern, Mr. St. Hilaire, and then we'll go to members of the body here, the ex officio members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The easement we're seeking to obtain here is over property owned by Mr. Noel Roy. To date, we've obtained numerous easements from other private property owners to piece together the Ives Trail. On one side, we've got a number of property owners to the east of this property. On the west of this property is the Lake Wabika property, which we've already obtained an easement on. So the vast majority of the Ives Trail has been pieced together, and after this parcel, well, we're about to get 2 easements probably this week in hand that have been fully negotiated and resolved. After that, we have one other easement under contract, and we'll, I believe, be done with the acquiring easements after this property with private property owners. After that, we do have to get something from the state of Connecticut. So this is a key section because we're pretty much done with the private property owners if we can resolve this piece. And as you can see from the large-scale map there, this is right in the middle of 2 very long sections of trail that arrive here. The portion of Mr. Roy's property that we seek to cross with the easement is sort of like a very narrow waist. And think of it as the waist in his property. He's got, when I say waist, like W-A-I-S-T. To the southwest of the easement section, he owns 28 plus acres. And to the northeast of the section we're crossing, he owns about 16 acres.
So it's this property here
And down to the lower left, this
okay,
whole section,
okay.
right there.
So, okay.
Okay, and they are connected. His parcels are not separated. So he can go from his 28 acres through what's going to be the easement area into his 16 acres already. What distinguishes this particular section of the proposed trail from other sections is that it does bisect property. In other words, to make an analogy, if we were getting an easement along somebody's side lot line in the setback area, it would have basically no impact because nobody can build in that area to begin with. If instead we said, we want an easement right through the middle of your backyard, they'd say, well, that diminishes my property because I can't put a swimming pool back there. So the location of the easement matters. So None of these easements are identical. Every property is unique, every setting and every context is unique in terms of the impact on the property and our negotiations with the property. This particular property owner had a concern that we're gonna have people hiking right across the middle of his 40-something acres of property. And like any landowner would have some concern about the impact on the marketability of that property, the value of that property. So he was very reluctant to give this easement. And I have to mention, every property owner we deal with is initially reluctant to give the city an easement, even when we pay them for it. We're happy that they finally come around to terms and agree that they're good citizens and cooperate with the city and get these kind of things done. But nobody's crazy about the city coming knocking on the door and asking to do something with their property. That should be established. It also needs to be said that this property owner did not come to us trying to make any kind of deal. We came to him and said, we want to put an easement here. He said, I'm a little concerned about this. I'd really rather not do that. After some initial discussions, it came to the point where Mr. Kozahowski and our finance director, Mr. St. Hilaire, suggested at some point, we've got this landlocked piece of land that is adjacent to yours. We're going to run the easement over our own land. Why don't we give you this land as in payment for the easement? So that was the genesis of the idea. Nobody, the property owner did not request it, didn't dream up this idea. It was completely our idea. Because we noticed this parcel sitting there that had been acquired by a tax sale in approximately, I believe it was 1962. Nobody's paying any taxes on it, of course, because we own it. Nobody's setting foot on it because it is surrounded on two sides by Mr. Roy's land, and on the third side by land of Lake Wabeeka. So, there is no way for us to get to it until we put a trail in. And so that's the background of the city-owned parcel and how it came to be on the table as for discussion as consideration for this easement. Now, I was at the public hearing, so I've heard some of the concerns expressed. I have to address a couple of them. One suggestion was, why couldn't we trade equal portion of our land for his, some lesser portion? Couple of reasons. One is, a small piece of our land for an easement over his land is valueless to him. That's not offering him anything. He doesn't want an easement crossing his valuable property in a 2-acre zone. We're saying, well, we'll give you a piece of open space. So there's no value to that. The second reason that became problematic is once we start chopping up our parcel, the 2.7-acre parcel, we have to get subdivision approval. If we seek subdivision approval, the parcel as chopped up cannot be rendered non-conforming for that zone, which is a 2-acre zone. And there's parameters in a zone besides just pure acreage to make up a conforming parcel. So once we start chopping a piece off that, we actually are creating an illegal parcel. We can't do it up to a point. There's probably little pieces we can take off it. Any significant piece, and then we get rendered the property non-conforming, subdivision will be denied. So there's the legal aspect of chopping up the property, and there's the practical aspect of giving Mr. Roy a small piece of open space in exchange for an easement that's got got him concerned about his whole 44 acres. There's no deal there. So it should be clear to this committee, I'd like to make it clear that, in my opinion, if we don't do a land swap for this, as we've discussed, the alternative is not some other land swap in all likelihood. It's going to be money. And if we can't arrive at a agreed upon consideration in terms of dollars, we're going to end up having to go to eminent domain. It's, the city strongly desires to avoid eminent domain in all matters, and especially since the Kelo New London case, even more so. It's really a last resort, and we're not building a school here or a police station. We're asking someone, we'd like you to let the public share the beauty of your land. it's not a great idea to take them to court over it to get them to do that.
Right.
So that is the background for how we arrived here. Now, the other question was, there is some monetary consideration that was put in the council resolution. I'd like to explain what that is. There's 11,000 there. When we've done each easement section or any open space acquisition, this is coming out of open space bond money, we've carved out a portion of that money to pay the legal fees that are going to the acquisition and other professional fees and outlays, so that for accounting purposes, we're allocating the work that goes into these acquisitions to the particular parcel. This 11,000 is a bit of an estimate, but here's the basis of it. 4,000 of it is a number for ATV barriers. That number came up because when we did Lake Wabeeka, we came up with an estimate of $4,000 for putting in some ATV barriers on that property. We've also agreed to put up some ATV barriers at different boundaries on this property. So we've got a reasonable basis for coming up with that number. We also agreed to pay a portion of Mr. Roy's attorney's fees because we spent the better part of a year going back and forth, and they really wanted to walk away from the table. At some point, we wanted to keep the dialogue going without going to court, and we said, they asked us to pay $1,500 of his attorney's fees, which he may have exceeded on his own by now, but it was capped at that. And we said, fine, that's a reasonable number. The rest of it is basically our own attorney's fees, from what's gone into it and what we expect to the end of the process.
So it's 5,500 between the
5,500,
ATV barriers
4,000.
and his legal fees, and 5,500 for our legal fees.
That's right. So that's where that money came from. And these are approximate numbers, yeah. So that's that addresses that concern. The other question, of course, in everybody's mind is, what is the value of our own parcel? The tax assessor says that the parcel, it assesses the parcel at $28,400, appraised value of $40,500. Now, it's questionable as to how you can even arrive at these numbers when you have a landlocked parcel. I mean, they have to put some number on it, but you have to look at the parcel realistically and say, okay, what can we possibly do with this parcel? If you can't get to it, and if pretty much the only appropriate prospective buyer of this property is Mr. Roy, Lake Wabeeka isn't going to buy it from us. Okay, it's not like we're next door to a McDonald's and if we don't deed this, if we did this property away, someday we might deed it to McDonald's for a whole lot of money. We do not have an alternate buyer that would establish some kind of other opportunity. There are no other opportunities that are apparent here. The other thing that reduces the value of the property, of course, is in negotiations. We said, initially it was, we'll transfer you the parcel. How about if we conserve the whole thing? So this value doesn't even reflect, to my knowledge, it doesn't say anything about that this is assessed as farmland or anything. So I don't even know that this is a conservation value, even at this low thing. If it was farmland or something, it might even be a lower number for all I know. I don't positively know the answer to that, but I don't see anything that says that it's farmland. If we're going to conserve that parcel, in other words, impose on the deed that we give to Mr. Roy a conservation easement, we've depressed the value of that property even further. And the other thing to consider is that the city has been going around acquiring open space, and we've been telling people, or using as a guideline in most of these cases, the number approximately 7,000 an acre for open space. We based that on, there had been there's not a lot of comps around town for sort of wasted land that's landlocked and everything. We found something that came close to $7,000 an acre, and we ended up using that as a benchmark for approaching various people, and we used it as a benchmark for some of the other Ives Trail property owners. So my point is, the city itself says, when we want to buy property from you, we're going to offer you $7,000 an acre for land that's pretty useless, just other than for open space. So applying that to our own property that's landlocked, 7,000 times 2.7 acres, it's not a ton of money. It's less even than the tax assessor says it is. So we have a rational basis for determining that this property is pretty valueless. Again, what it comes down to is we found a way to make the property owner happy and get what we want at no cash outlay to the city other than the small amount we talked about. And we avoid court in the process, and we finish off this important long section of the trail without delay and without, time works against you. If you don't get things buttoned up, sometimes other things spring open, in my experience.
Mr. Hammond, I know there were some questions in the public hearing about if this property transfer to Mr. Roy would offer him any developmental differences to his property or any benefits for subdivision for him, or could you just speak to those?
Yeah, I have to say that anything I say about that is purely speculative. We had no discussions with Mr. Roy about any value, any actual value to him of this property in that context. And we didn't do our own separate analysis. I mean, it would be actually require spending a lot of money to analyze his 44 acres to figure out what this 2.7 acres does. But just speaking from my general experience, the fact that this is 40-something acres in the middle of the wilderness. Okay, he's got 44 acres. You got Lakewood Beacon on the other side. That's pretty much all wilderness. That's not the developed part of the property. That's where the trail's going. He's got another neighbor that's got 80 acres. So this is about as out of the way as any place you can imagine in Danbury. He's a long way from any road. If he ever wants to develop in there, he's going to have to pay a lot of money to bring a road in. Okay, a long way from Long Ridge Road or somewhere else. That's a major expenditure. So my guess is that unless the market turns around anytime soon, it's going to be a long time before somebody's delving that far into the woods to build some very expensive homes. And if they do, the most I can see this doing is potentially freeing up another building lot for him somehow. I don't even know if that's possible, because part of the analysis requires how much of this is wetlands, how much of it is ledge. It may be that it adds absolutely no value to him. But on the most that I could see it doing for him is that it adds to his 40-something acres, and if he could say, just to pick a number, if he could put 15 or 20 lots in there before getting this parcel, maybe he gets an extra lot. Again, we have no way of knowing that. But what I think we can have a good idea is that even if that were to happen someday in the distant future, I don't see the downside to the city. His benefit is not our loss. That's the way I look at it. The city's giving up a parcel that is not earning any taxes. If someday in the distant future it ends up resulting in one more house on his 44 acres, that's going to be money on our tax rolls.
If I could.
Ray, could you just, or maybe this is to David, talk about the taxes that we might be generating from that? Are we making a lot of money in taxes during the course of the year? Are we talking about $200, $2,000 a year? What would we be pulling off of that? So what that we haven't been currently collecting?
Well, about $400 a year. That's what you're not making right now.
Mm-hmm.
But, when it goes on the tax roll, collectively, they'll probably be, they may reevaluate, I don't know. So it could be up to $400, it could be less, depends on how it's valued. So, but right now, you're not generating anything, and Mr. Hammond did a great job explaining it. But you have a liability issue too. On the trail, you have a known potential liability. Everybody accepts that. There, that's a liability that nobody is even aware of. If somebody goes on that property and gets hurt, you're on the hook for it, folks.
I'd like to add one thing. It's obvious from the map, but for the record, we would be transferring this parcel and then immediately getting back an easement over a large swath of it. So there's an actual deduction, in a sense, in value, even from the low value adds, due to the fact that the city's getting a benefit right back across the property that we're transferring to them, across the base of the triangle there, to get to the Lakewood Beacon property.
do I want to, Mr. Cunningham, or I'll probably go to you first, and then go to Mr. Kojahowski after that. Is there, would you like to add, I think Mr. Yemen did do a great job explaining in, from the Ives Trail Task Force, your perspective.
Right. I've actually been on the ground here, and I have points on the map that the surveyor laid out. Coming in from the Old Post Road, crossing Mr. Roy's property, it's wet. Going back on the city's property, it's wet. The Ives Trail as laid out around there actually skirts a swamp, so that everything in the triangle and that whole white patch next to it is all swampland. I wouldn't say that nobody could ever build on that, because these days people build things that I thought never could happen, but I wouldn't put anything on it. The value of it is for the trail. Other than property has some value in and of itself, I can't see any other real value to it. This is actually our third alternate for where to put the trail through here. And it is our last best hope. If we don't get this 100 feet or 100 yards or whatever it is from it, we're dead-ended. We can't go anywhere else unless we can convince him to give us some other piece of property, which he's expressed no interest at all in giving us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kojahowski?
I'd like to address the environmental value of the property as it is now versus what it would be once the conveyance would take place. I'm talking about the financial value, I'm talking about the environmental value. The triangle piece, as Mr. Cunningham referred to, is portions of it are wet. At the very least, it shows it to be bordering this big swamp here, so it is a regulated wetland. It's also very steep. So from my own experience of working with the Environmental Impact Commission while an employee of the city for 27 years, it would be challenging, if not virtually impossible, to get a permit to do much of anything. So from the city's perspective, can the city do anything with this property? No, other than open space. That's the current environmental value of the property that we currently have. Once the transfer goes through, once the conveyance would go through, the city no longer owns this, but as Mr. Yeaman has pointed out, it goes with the conservation easement. So the open space value to the city, even though we don't own it, stays the same. The only other thing I will add is there could be an argument that we're increasing the open space value of the city by making this swap, because currently this is in the middle of nowhere. You don't have a trail going to it. We can't connect either section until we get through this final small piece. If the conveyance goes through, you have a recreational aspect for those people who want to enjoy the open space value of this landlocked property. And as Mr. St. Hilaire has pointed out, that currently we have no liability protection. When we have a trail, you can't have liability protection. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Elpern?
What would you like?
Planning's feeling about this transfer?
Oh, I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. I think that summed up the limitations on the property for development. The only thing you could do is, if he were to combine this with his other properties, he could use it to try to hit that 80,000 square foot zoning minimum, per lot. Using a portion of it for maybe 2 lots. Okay, that doesn't mean he gets 2 additional lots. He gets 1 additional lot. but you can use it that way, all right, rather than use the triangle as one lot. But, it doesn't have access, and that's gonna be a very expensive proposition to get back there, and again, it's 2 acres in. So he's gonna be limited as it is.
So if anything, worst case scenario, it might net him one additional lot if he were someday trying to develop his whole parcel.
The equivalent of 1 extra lot, yeah. And out of, let's see, got 44 acres, 21, 22 lots, maybe another one. But there are such steep slopes along there. Simple math oftentimes doesn't work when it comes to trying to predict how many lots you can cram in, because you've got to work with that, and that can be a real limiting factor.
Mr. St. Clair, did you want to add anything else?
Quite frankly, I think it was very well summed up by Mr. Yeaman.
Okay. Mr. Curran?
How long does the easement last?
Permanent.
So if you was to sell to another buyer, somebody buys the land?
That's
do
right,
they buy it knowing?
easement runs with the land is permanent.
So I don't know what's in it for Mr. Roy. I think
Right.
it's a good deal for us, because I wouldn't want somebody walking through an easement in my backyard. I mean, that's what we're basically saying. He's gonna have a piece of property that he's got easement between him and there. I don't know.
That's
Think we
the
tip our
amazing,
hat to him.
that's the amazing thing about this is that in some ways people object to easements more than if you just bought a piece of land off them and you never, we're gonna have to coexist with this property owner. When you get an easement like this, that's another reason not to sue him. We're gonna have to live with that. People are gonna be walking through his property and dealing. Other property, if we carve off a corner of his property, buy it, we're done. People walk through there, it's none of his business. But here, it continues to be his business, so it's very important to resolve these things without taking an adversarial stance, if at all
I
possible.
agree. Mr. Cunningham, just how will the trail be marked that would somehow signify that on each side of it is private property and please don't trespass? Are they gonna do that on the trail, or?
Many parts of the trail are going through easements that we've purchased from private owners, and we need signs on there that will say, stay on the trail, don't wander off into the woods.
Okay. Anything else from any ex officio members? Let record reflect too that 6:20 Mrs. Kleschel arrived with us. Okay. Jack, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Trying to write a motion here.
Okay. I'll give Jack a minute to get a motion together, and then when he's ready, I'll entertain a motion.
Point of order on the motion, Joe. The charge of this committee, obviously, is to recommend the sale or deny the recommendation of the sale. Is the charge of this committee also to adopt the resolution for the easement?
No, that would be, I think that,
Is there
would be the
another-
council's,
that's another-
that would be the council's
Okay, so I'm not
function.
gonna put that in. Okay, with that being said, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Knapp.
Thank you.
I'll move to recommend the sale of the city-owned lot number I-23012 to Noel C. Roy for the purposes of the creation of the Ives Trail Greenway as described in the posted notice pursuant to statute.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion passes. Seeing no further business that may probably come before this committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Great.